A radical Islamic terrorist killed 49 people at least and wounded dozens more, dozens. It was the worst terrorist attack since September 11th and the worst mass shooting in our country's history. We want to live in a country where gay and lesbian Americans and all Americans are safe from radical Islam. Which, by the way, wants to murder and has murdered gays, and they enslave women. Now, Hillary Clinton talks about women, and she talks about how she's going to do it. She plays the woman card more than any human being I've ever seen in my life. And frankly, I don't even think women like her from everything I see. And yet she's taking $25 million from certain countries, and much more than that when you add it up, that treat women horrendously, that kill gays. And you know what's going to happen, folks? And you know what we're going to do right now? Let's call for Hillary and Bill Clinton to give back the $25+ million to the countries that we're talking about. Once again, we've seen that political correctness is deadly. They don't want to talk about the problem. And I watched President Obama today, and he was more angry at me than he was at the shooter. And many people said that. One of the folks on television said, boy, has Trump gotten under his skin. But he was more angry, and a lot of people have said this, the level of anger, that's the kind of anger he should have for the shooter and these killers that shouldn't be here.
That's right. The globalists are engaged in a conquering of the United States, a cultural conquering, using Islam that they're bringing in. They allow the radical elements to organize, attack, and then they say, oh, we're going to censor your Facebook or Twitter if you criticize it. You're stirring them up. We're going to take you off this local radio station because you're Islamophobic. Look at this headline out of Reuters. Islamophobia on the rise in Germany, study finds. Because of the rapes, the robberies, the murders? You mean, is it phobia of, say, black widows? They can kill you? A phobia is something that's illegitimate. You know, it's a fear that's irrational. You talk to the hundreds of thousands of Christians killed by ISIS in Syria and other areas and ask me if their fear of Islam is a phobia. This is mental illness. We are joined by the author of See Something, Say Nothing. This has been highly recommended by folks in special forces that are involved in domestic operations. This has been highly recommended by Roger Stone. He was on yesterday. This has been highly recommended by everybody from WorldNet Daily Books. We're not selling it yet. We should. I saw a lot of WorldNet Daily Books. Philip Haney and Art Moore, See Something, Say Nothing. A Homeland Security officer exposes the government's submission to jihad. There is a stand down going on. And when Obama opens the door, brings people in, blocks the FBI and others from stopping it, well, that's a false flag. They're going to blame on the Second Amendment. It's a real terror. It's real jihad. It's real Islamic behavior. Orthodox Islamic behavior. That's what they call radical Islam. But when the government or criminal elements of it open the door and protect it and call off the sheepdogs and let them attack, it's a false flag. And now Obama came out and blamed the Second Amendment and said, American terrorist, homegrown. We need more laws, even though this guy was working for a security contractor out of the UK. Even though he told coworkers, I'm going to kill people, they wouldn't do anything. His boss wouldn't do anything because they're protecting it. It's beyond political correctness, and they're holding America hostage now with these jihad forces, saying you submit to us, just like they declared civil emergency in Europe, in France and Germany, arresting people that hand out flyers on the street, suspending people's Facebook accounts. We videotaped it last week, our reporters in Dresden. We see General Petraeus walking by and ask him about it. He runs from us to go into the Bilderberg meeting. That's how, and he's getting millions from the Saudis. Hillary's gotten 20% of her money from the Saudis. So he joins us for the rest of the hour. Philip Haney studied Arabic culture and language while working as a scientist in the Middle East before he was hired as a founding member of the Department of Homeland Security in 2003, becoming an armed Customs and Border Patrol protection officer. He served several tours of duty in the National Targeting Center near Washington, D.C., where he quickly was promoted to its advanced targeting team, an unprecedented accomplishment for an agent on temporary duty assignment. Officer Haney won numerous awards and commendations for his superiors for meticulously compiling information and producing actionable reports that led to the identification of hundreds of terrorists. He has specifically and specialized in Islamic theology and the strategy and tactics of the global Islamic movement. He retired honorably in July 2015 and has now written the book, See Something, Say Nothing. We saw an article about this Sunday. It was bombshell. We wrote about it. Drudge picked it up. Here's the headline. Hillary State Department blocked investigation into Orlando killer's mosque. Further proof Hillary funded rise of ISIS. Well, that's what Seymour Hersh has talked about. So this is deeper than just political correctness. I want him to get into the meat and potatoes of this, and I appreciate him coming on with us. You can find the book at WorldNet Daily, Amazon.com, everywhere else. But I want to ask Philip Haney about persecution of whistleblowers, about what's really going on inside, and my statement of this has got to go beyond political correctness. Even though Saudi Arabia is teetering on the edge of collapse in many respects, from my research, correct me if I'm wrong, still it's like they're failing forward, like dominating the West, buying everybody off, and pretty much holding us hostage that if we don't submit to them, they'll activate these terror cells. Mr. Haney, is that an accurate statement, or correct me of where I'm wrong?
Well, in particular, the organizations that are what I call the Asian branch of the global Islamic movement are funded by Saudi Arabia through the madrasa system. So, yes, there is a direct link, a historical link between Saudi Arabia and the funding of the madrasas, the Islamic schools that these individuals go to from the time they're little kids till they're grown up. That produces Taliban and a group called Tablighi Jamaat, Lashkar-e-Taiba. Those are the groups that come from Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, that part of the world. So, yes, there is a connection.
Well, let's talk about your book, just in a gestalt, what's really happening, why we see, whether it's San Bernardino or whether it's Orlando or Fort Hood, they say it's not Islamic terror. They try to cover it up. But before it happens, we see that there's agents being told, we may investigate you for civil rights investigations, stop looking into this. And we got this guy's dad at the White House. What's going on here?
Well, the father was the vice president of the mosque, the Fort Pierce Mosque. If you took him at face value when he started appearing in public, you got the impression he had no clue whatsoever what his son was doing. But he's actually the vice president of the mosque. And there's a concept that I'd like to try to share with everyone, and that is like the solar system. All the planets in the solar system rotate around the sun. Yes, there are different kinds of planets, and they have moons and so on. But the one thing that they all have in common is the force of gravity that comes from the sun, influences all of them. And the thing that is driving the whole global jihad movement, global Islamic movement, is the one thing is the implementation of Sharia law. That is the macro strategic goal of the global Islamic movement. It isn't actually jihad or terrorism or any of the rest of the things that we're calling it. It is Sharia law. And the other things, terrorism and so on, are tactics to implement the strategic goal of Sharia law. It's actually quite simple when you put it that way.
Am I right in saying that I think they've launched a new phase of a hot war, testing and probing with these basic sleeper cells and other organizations that are just directed by ideology?
Well, they are bound by their ideology. I should say compelled. Like water, when it meets an obstacle, water will either go over, around, through, or under any obstacle that it meets. That's the implacable force of water. And the gravitational force of Sharia law exerts itself in exactly the same way. So they are compelled to find different tactical approaches to achieving their overriding strategic goal, which is implementation of Sharia law.
Wow. Well, I want to go through all this, the Orlando attacks and more, but first, obviously, the stand-downs, the agents like yourself not allowed to do their job, the FBI ordered to stand down. I mean, it's every time, from Hassan to San Bernardino to this, to the Army-Navy recruiting centers where they say it wasn't an attack. I mean, what? I mean, we know what the jihadis are up to, but what's happening at the White House? All the public threats these people make, the traveling overseas, their buddies are blowing themselves up. He's telling coworkers he's going to kill them. His brother-in-law is bringing in refugees. The dad's hanging out with Obama. What in Hades is going on? What is Obama thinking?
Well, I wish I had about a minute with him. I don't know who's advising, but I can guarantee you one thing. If I had an opportunity to sit him down with a magic law enforcement computer, I could show him within 1 minute, 2 minutes top, all the derogatory information on every one of these individual organizations, particularly the Muslim Brotherhood front groups in the United States and the mosques, the affiliated organizations and mosques. I could show him. We have archives of derogatory information on these organizations going back years and years. Myself and my colleagues have put it in. We've done our job, but the administration literally, deliberately, and intentionally has refused to acknowledge the existence of this information.
So to be clear, there's files on all these people. They're saying we need more NSA stuff, but it's all there, and they're just not acting on it.
The Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection was founded to gather first-level intelligence information at the border, meaning when you encounter people coming back from flights from overseas or when they're preparing to depart, to go outbound, we call it, to go overseas. We have the authority within the border, a greater amount of authority than the CIA and the FBI combined, to gather this kind of basic intelligence information. And over the years, we have been handcuffed more and more to the point where we're barely capable of gathering the kind of information that we could then share, let's say, with the FBI and collaborate with them to conduct effective law enforcement operations. But over time, as it's described in the book, this was diminished more and more each year.
Why do you think they're phasing in this stand down? Because the Border Patrol admits that they're ordered to, quote, complete the smuggling process just of illegals in general, or the so-called minor children. And then we also see the reports in the news where planes land from all over the world, and they're said, oh, we're not going to check their IDs or anything right now. Just bring them on in. I mean, what's going on there?
That's an abrogation of the basic responsibility of any elected official, is to uphold the constitutional command or mandate to protect American citizens from threat, both foreign and domestic. We're talking here about a macro level abrogation of responsibility that's putting us all at threat. And as long as we stand by and allow the administration to continue to misinform us and disinform us, then we're going to see the same results that we've seen so far over and over again. Because the global Islamic movement is not going to tell us thank you for allowing us to make this much progress. Now we'll stop. Every step forward they take, they reinforce their position and look for a tactical opportunity to make another move forward. We see it everywhere in the world, and North America is not immune from this force of gravity.
Well, that's what you wrote in the book, and then the book just came out, and boom, look what just happened. Do you see this just in patterns that the jihad attacks are obviously increasing? Will they increase exponentially, or do they go in waves, or what does your gut tell you? What do your colleagues tell you?
I can tell you, based on numbers, there have been more than 28,000 Islamic Jihad attacks in the world since 9/11. That averages out to about one an hour. So they're happening like lightning strikes all over the world continuously. Again, America is not immune. Until the day comes that we are able to honestly and courageously stand up and have a discussion about the nature of Sharia law and how it is compatible with the U.S. Constitution, then we're not going to have the wherewithal we need to recover ourselves and really stand up for the principles that this country was founded on. This isn't really even a civil rights issue at all. This is a basic survival issue.
Well, I know this. We've done this on air. When there's mosque openly calling for killing people, we'll call Homeland Security, and they don't even care. Or we'll point out things are going on, and it just seems to go into a black hole. But then meanwhile, Obama's on TV saying the #1 threat is Christians and gun owners, and that American homegrown terrorism is a problem. This guy wasn't homegrown. His parents were from Afghanistan. His dad was the vice president of the mosque. And, of course, he is Philip Haney, see something, say nothing, retired DHS intelligence officer, blows whistle on federal government's role in Islamic terror threat. We got like 5 minutes left. I really appreciate your time, sir. You're basically on the national news right now. We have audience much bigger than CNN, say, with their average show, millions an hour. Just what's the data dump folks need to know about the stand down in government and where this is going?
Well, counterterrorism is just like my former career as a scientist in entomology. It's very simple. Follow the trail, find the nest. That's counterterrorism in a nutshell. Follow the trail, find the nest. We're being told by the administration there is no nest. Don't even look for it because it doesn't exist. And that's about as absurd as it would be to go around stomping on ants one at a time while pretending there is no nest. So I would encourage us to reevaluate the way we approach this problem and recognize that it's not just individuals, it's also networks. And that those networks exist here in the United States. They've been built up over at least 3 generations of immigrants primarily, and that we're not immune to the forces of the Sharia law in influence of Islamic life. So we have to come to terms with this and then compare it to the Constitution and stand up for it courageously when they are not compatible. That's what I would say. Follow the trail, find the nest, and let us do our jobs in the law enforcement community and in the military community. We've been handcuffed by rules of engagement to the point that it's almost impossible for us to do our job.
Why do you think that's being done? I mean, for me, it's beyond political correctness. Why would Europe let 5 million of these people in the last 3 years? I mean, this is suicidal.
Yes, it's kind of a psychosis. Natan Sharansky has a premise that's very true. If you lose your identity as a person or a nation, you will die. You cannot continue to function if you lose your identity. And that's what we're on the verge of doing if we're not careful. We
don't have an identity except political correctness. That's just a bunch of mindless fluff.
Well, I'd like to recommend listeners to go to the 2012 FBI Touchstone document, their training guidelines, where in paragraph 1 it says that even though an individual is affiliated with a known terrorist organization, you're basically not allowed to assume that that person himself might be a terrorist.
That's funny. Sorry.
That's why the FBI seems to be having trouble connecting the dots with these kind of investigations.
Yeah, I talked to some folks that were there on the ground in Orlando, and they call them all in the briefing rooms, military, FBI, you name it, and they tell them, you are not investigating Islamists. You are not investigating the mosque. You are not to use the word Muslim. This is not an investigation of Muslims. And there's like 100 people in a room with Homeland Security from Jay Johnson up there, one of his lackeys telling him this. This is ridiculous.
And see, that's what I mean about an abrogation of the Constitution. Our founding fathers, the geniuses that they were, set up a checks and balance system. Do you realize how far from due process we are when we have one branch, the executive branch of the government, dictating what every other branch shall do, including law enforcement, and intruding themselves into the law enforcement arena with policies that are subjective, that have no oversight.
It's totally dictatorial. Whatsoever. I mean, you can get away with anything. That's how Hillary can do all this illegal stuff, is because the executive's covering her butt.
Well, I was investigated 9 times by my own agency for doing my job. I took the oath to defend our country from threat, both foreign and domestic. I took it very seriously, and it got me in a lot of trouble. But thank God I was able to survive it and retire honorably. And that's why I'm telling my story now, because my vow is still on active duty.
That's right. Let me ask you this question. The people persecuting you, were they doing it just to climb the ladder? or was it this sick leftist love affair with anything anti-freedom? I mean, for me, it's a form of Stockholm Syndrome meets bondage. I mean, it's kind of like 50 Shades of Grey taken to the next level. There's this weird infatuation, I know, with liberal women to go have, you know, jihadi husbands and be slapped around. I mean, I don't understand it.
There's two factors. It's ideological for sure, but there's another one I think is deeper, and that is fear. The fear of doing the right thing. Fear of loss. If you do the right thing, you might suffer loss. And that fear keeps people from doing what they know is right. In other words, it keeps them from fulfilling their vow. Fear is a very powerful and destructive force.
Oh boy, is it!
And
I can't live under it. My only fear is that I'm going to roll over and be a jellyfish. I only beat myself up, and I'm serious. I wish I could find a way to not feel guilty that I'm not doing enough. I am so unhappy right now. I have never been this unhappy. I should be happy. We're waking a lot of folks up, but I am just seeing the president get up today and blame, quote, Americans. He said Americans. We've got to keep guns out of the hands of Americans like this. This guy wasn't an American.
No, he wasn't. He was a citizen of our country, but he was not an American in the constitutional definition, which leads to another issue, the argument.
That's right. I mean, if he's pledged allegiance to ISIS, he's pledged allegiance to a foreign power. Deport his ass.
That's right. It's assimilation. We hear about it a lot, as though it's Americans' fault that Muslims can't assimilate or won't. It's not our fault. They have to make the choice to assimilate, but they are taught that it is the abrogation, a violation of Sharia law to assimilate to a non-Islamic culture. They're not here to assimilate. They didn't come here to learn to like hot dogs and watermelon. They came here with the understanding that if they come here and settle in a country and implement Islam and Sharia law, that they will receive the same reward in heaven as the men with the guns. And that is an Islamic theological fact. They know it when they come here, that if they promote Islam and the implementation of Sharia law, not the U.S. Constitution, that they will receive a reward in heaven from Allah.
Yeah, the left thinks they're going to assimilate, and they're totally out of their minds.
No, the harder they try to make them, the worse it will get.
Well, I'm not assimilating to the leftist garbage either, and I'm not assimilating to jihad garbage either. I'm not going under any of this, and I'm telling you, it is really getting bad, and I'm seeing it all over Austin, and I'm seeing, you know, the left cuckold to this whole deal, and I'm not going to put up with it. Philip?
Okay, one last thing. If we don't face it voluntarily, we will ultimately face it involuntarily. It's inevitable one way or the other. We have to deal with this from a constitutional perspective.
Well, let me ask you this then, because I've got other guests coming in, but I want to invite you back. In 60 seconds, how do we counter this?
Become familiar with the Constitution and become familiar with Sharia law. Arm yourselves with information. Gain a mastery of this subject. You have to be a part of it. And then go back and read the Declaration of Independence. What it called us to do as citizens is to be in control of our own government. We have the right to do it. We need to do it. Now is the time, not tomorrow, now.
Philip, we look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you for going through all that persecution to get this book out. I talked to Joseph Farah earlier this week. He's very, very proud of this book and that they've published it and the courage you've had. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, everyone, for listening as well.
Let's bring in the other guys now that were just over in Europe for 10 days covering Bilderberg, the very globalists that are engineering all this. I mean, these people are just, and again, this whole Islamic invasion, I don't want to obsess on it all day. I have to, because they're blaming guns and the Second Amendment and America and Americana. By name, Obama is blaming us. So here's the deal. You're not blaming me and my family, you piece of filth. You're not going to gut what's left of the country and have extrajudicial no-gun buy list. I'm not putting up with it. People say, oh, well, what are you going to do? Let me tell you, we're going to do a lot. We mean business. And Obama doesn't look too happy these days because they bit off more than they can chew. Let me tell you something. They're not getting away with this. And we have to understand no matter what color we are or where we're from or what we stand for, you know, religiously or whatever, we should stand for free speech. And I'm not here to just hate Muslims. They're bullied by their own system as well. But I didn't opt in to be under your system. And my daughters and my son didn't either, okay? So it's not happening. And I'm not going to go along with a police state either that's built up to supposedly counter you, but we never counter what you're doing. So there is a clash of civilizations taking place. We are being played off against each other. I recognize that people in Islamic countries are going to fall victim of this. There is a larger game plan. But if we can't even address Islam and radical forms that are really orthodox, then there's no way to turn this around.
Can we have this camera focusing on all the audience? Because every now and then, every time we have a conference, every time we invite a speaker, they always can come with the same accusations. This speaker supports death penalty for homosexuals. This speaker supports death penalty for this crime or that. He is homophobic. They subjugate women, etc., etc., etc. It's the same old stuff coming all the time. And we always try to tell them, I always try to tell them that, look, it's not that speaker that we're inviting who has these extreme radical views, as you say. These are general views that every Muslim actually has. Every Muslim believes in these things. Just because they're not telling you about it, or just because they're not out there in the media, doesn't mean they don't believe in them. So I will ask you, everyone in the room, how many of you are normal Muslims? You're not extremists, you're not radical, just normal Sunni Muslims. Please raise your hands. Everybody, mashallah, subhanallah. Okay, take down your hands again. How many of you agree that men and women should sit separate? Please raise your hands.
Sisters in particular.
Everyone agree. Everyone agree. Brothers and sisters. Subhanallah. So it's not just these radical sheikhs then. Allahu Akbar. Next question. How many of you agree that the punishments described in the Quran and the Sunnah, whether it is death, whether it is stoning for adultery, whatever it is, if it is from Allah and His Messenger, that is the best punishment ever possible for humankind, and that is what we should apply in the world. Well, who agrees with that? Allahu Akbar. Are you all radical extremists? Subhanallah. So all of you are saying that you are common Muslims, you all go to the different masajids in Norway, or are you like a specific sect, like the Islam Net sect or anything like that? Are you like that? No? Are you like that? Please raise your hand if you're like this extreme Islam Net sect or anything like that. No one. Allahu Akbar. How many of you just go to these normal masajids in Norway, the normal Sunni mosques? Please raise your hands. Allahu Akbar. So what's the politicians gonna say now? What is the media gonna say now? That we're all extremists? We're all radicals? We need to deport all of us from this country? Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar. Takbir! 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 May we have the next question, please?
Right there again. He's up there complaining about the media characterizing Muslims who have these beliefs that homosexuals should be killed as extremist Muslims. So then he asks this huge crowd of so-called moderate Muslims, do they share this belief that homosexuals should be killed, that women should be stoned to death for adultery? They all put their hands up. White, black, Arab, doesn't matter. They all put their hands up. And then he said, look, this is not extremists that believe this. This is a normal Muslim belief. And all these so-called westernized Muslims, Norway in this case, share those same beliefs. So again, that leftist trope that it's a tiny minority of radical fringe extremists that have these beliefs is complete bunkum. And you saw the poll out of the United Kingdom 2 months ago. 52% of Muslims think that homosexuality should be illegal. You can look at the Pew polls out of the Middle East of those who believe in Sharia law. The majority agree that homosexuals should be executed. This isn't about jihadists. This isn't about extremists. This is about Islam. This is what they actually believe. But the left refuses to call it out because they care more about protecting the feelings of Muslims than the lives of gay people. And you can look at the preacher, the cleric there in Orlando, who just weeks before Omar Mateen's rampage was calling for gays to be executed, quote, out of compassion. This is his quote. Death is the sentence. There's nothing to be embarrassed about this. Death is the sentence. That's what he said about homosexual people. This is a so-called moderate cleric out of Orlando. So again, no surprise that we've had numerous gay people, numerous homosexual groups who have come out in the aftermath of this and have switched their allegiance to Trump and away from the likes of Hillary Clinton, 20% of her campaign being funded by Saudi Arabia, a country that still executes gays, that whips them, that puts them in prison. So this is out of the Inquisitor. Donald Trump gets LGBT support boost after Orlando shooting. Donald Trump appears to have lured a growing number of LGBT voters away from his Democratic challenger, Hillary Clinton, funded by Saudi Arabia, who kill gay people. Trump's speech after the Orlando shooting by self-avowed ISIS terrorists has earned him the steadfast loyalty of gay Americans who are now keenly focused on national security, immigration, and terrorism matters. And remember, the people who throw gays off buildings in the Middle East, they're not inspired to do so by Western foreign policy. Again, that was the justification trotted out in the aftermath of this massacre, because the gunman said that it was a retribution, that the West should stop bombing ISIS. Well, ISIS throws gay people off buildings in the Middle East. They throw Syrian people off buildings. They're not Westerners, they're Syrian. And the people watching in the crowds below do absolutely nothing. They sit back and enjoy the show, which is not to say that a lot of these populations are living under absolute tyranny and just to survive they have to go along with this. But again, they're throwing Middle Easterners off buildings. They're not just killing Westerners. So again, this trope that everything is somehow justified as a reaction to Western foreign policy, complete BS.
We're going to punish our enemies and we're going to reward our friends.